Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 234 based on novel. So let's start. According to the old man in yellow robe, 4 years ago, Yi Luotian united with Qin Huangmi Valley, the first force in the western regions, and the two sides joined hands to dominate the western regions. The original low-key Qin Huangmi Valley was born suddenly for some reason. It was no longer hidden from the western wasteland, but began to endlessly annex all the big and small forces in the western regions together with Yi Luotian. In a short period of 4 years, most of the forces in the western regions that were originally based on each side have been razed to the ground under the iron hoof of Qin Huangmi Valley. The strong people in the door either obey Qin Huangmi Valley or have been killed. In 4 years, 1/5 of the so-called top 500 forces in the western regions have been destroyed. Some even ordinary disciples in the sect have not escaped killing. It can be seen that Qin Huangmi Valley is ruthless. In recent years, Qin Huangmi Valley has not only expanded its influence in the western wilderness region, but also extended its hand to the Shilin region. Now, countless forces, large and small, in the Shilin region have been swallowed up by them. According to the old man in yellow robe, the valley owner of Qin Huangmi Valley, accompanied by Yi Luotian, went to the last area in the Shilin region recently, areas that have not been annexed by them. Shilin Mountains. Shilin mountain range has been separated by warcraft all year round. The 4 king beasts in the depths of Shilin mountain range have frightened countless strong people, especially the one in the hinterland of Shilin, which is enough to make the whole western region tremble. However, this time, the purpose of Qin Huangmi Valley and Yi Luotian is the latter. They not only want to annex the Shilin Mountains, but also want to take the king of the Shilin Mountains, Cold Frost. Deep in the Shilin Mountains. The vast team stands in the depths of the Shilin Mountains. On the opposite peak, several figures are standing impressively, blocking the whereabouts of this group of people. Looking back, behind this group of people, there is a sea of fire in the endless mountains. Countless warcraft corpses are everywhere, and wildfire is diffuse, gradually covering the whole Shilin Mountains. Our Shilin Mountains have always had no disputes with the outside world. Why do you do this here? Among them, Tianying, dressed in blue robes, stood and looked at the opposite party with a low face. Although the number of people opposite is not large, they all have a long breath, which is not comparable to them at all. In particular, the 2 leading people, although they have no breath to reveal, but the special momentum and pressure contained in the invisible makes them feel more dangerous. They only felt that feeling when facing the adult in the hinterland of Shilin. That means that the 2 in front of them, their accomplishments, may have stepped into the source of transformation. The source environment is strong. In his heart, Tianying stood forward, but he didn't step back, but his face looked more dignified. Cold Frost, I haven't seen you for years. How's your internal injury? Haha. I know you're inside. Why, now I don't dare to meet you face to face. What's the taste of cold poison attack? Isn't it hard? Haha. Ignoring Tianying's words, among the 2 leading people opposite, a middle-aged man in a blue robe looked at the depths of the Shilin Mountains with a grim smile. With his cultivation, he could clearly feel an extremely strong and familiar breath. The owner of the breath was undoubtedly Cold Frost. The laughter spread between heaven and earth, shaking the whole mountain range. The mighty voice of words made the winter snow flying in the hinterland of Shilin lag slightly, which showed the strength of this man's cultivation. If you don't talk, I'll just take your waste hands and operate first. I don't believe you don't do it. With a cold smile, at the moment when the middle-aged man's words fell, he waved his backhand, and a fierce energy competition suddenly burst out, which was like lightning. However, in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of the eagle and chopped it hard at the eagle's head. Such a fierce attack, even with the cultivation of Tianying, had no time to escape. Therefore, I could only watch the energy competition approach. Then, just when the energy competition was about to fall to the top of Tianying's head, a huge black shadow suddenly flashed out in front of it. I just heard a puff, and the blood poured out, the roar of pain also came out, but the energy that would have fallen on the top of the eagle was successfully resisted. When the people present looked intently, What stood in front of the eagle was a huge python. On the top of the python's head, there grew a single horn in the shape of lightning, and the black scales covered all over the body were hard smashed because they resisted the attack. They were dripping with blood and flesh, and even could clearly see the thick white bones exposed in the air. Scale snake. The body of the scale snake is the narwhal snake, but after it leaves the customs, facing the narwhal snake whose cultivation has reached the 9-star fighting emperor, Tianying and others named it for convenience. As the 9-star fighting emperor, narwhal snake has always been the strongest among his 5 people in cultivation. Its strength can be described as strong, but now it still seems so vulnerable to the strong in the source environment. Ha ha ha, it's unexpected that this guy should stop this blow for you. He's a fool who doesn't know how to live or die. The most unreliable thing in the world is your so-called friendship. In front of interests, nothing is worth mentioning. Seeing this, the middle-aged man sneered, disdained and laughed on his face, and showed a look of hatred in the depths of his eyes. People like you don't deserve friendship at all. The eagle turned and shot with anger on his face, clenched his fists, and the fighting spirit in his body circulated wildly. His blue eyes were full of endless killing intention. I don't deserve it. It's not up to you to say that. At the moment when the words fell in Tianying's mouth, the middle-aged man's face opposite suddenly showed his cruel killing intention, and his body turned sharply. However, in the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Tianying. He raised his right hand, and the fierce source gas condensed on his palm, making the whole hand look like a sharp blade and chop it off against Tianying's head. This time, no one can save him again. Drink. But at this time, there was a sudden cold rage between heaven and earth. Almost at the same time, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly decreased. At the same time, a pair of ice-blue ice mirrors suddenly appeared in front of Tianying and blocked the blow of the middle-aged man for him again. Ice Avenue, cold frost, you finally did it. Deep in the Xiaolin Mountains, the middle-aged man slammed his backhand on the ice mirror in front of him, and his fierce strength suddenly broke out. His body also took the opportunity to quickly retreat, but in a twinkling, he had returned to the other person. When the body stopped, the middle-aged man quickly raised his eyes and looked at it. At this moment, a beautiful woman in a long ice-blue dress was standing proudly. A pair of beautiful eyes with the same ice blue were staring at the two opposite people with endless cold. Ha ha! Cold Frost, you are finally willing to come out. I thought you would only guard your broken place and hide in it forever. The middle-aged man's face piled up a grim smile, and his eyes constantly scanned the proud body of Cold Frost, but there was no half-greed *** in his eyes, only infinite killing intention. At their level, there is no desire for women and the like. What he does now in his heart is only power, strong power, which is the main tone of the world. Qin Shuo, today, the king will calculate the accounts with you. Hearing Qin Shuo's words, the Cold Frost's pretty face looked colder and colder. With a slight lift of her eyes, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly decreased a lot. At the same time, Qin Shuo and others clearly saw that at this moment, the skin surface exposed to the air by the Cold Frost was covered with a thin layer of cold ice. With a smell of forest cold, he immediately diffused out of the Cold Frost. When he felt the cold breath, Rao was surprised by Qin Shuo's accomplishments. From this point alone, he could clearly feel that not only the cold poison in the Cold Frost had been eliminated, but also his accomplishments had reached the peak in the later stage of Huiyuan territory, even compared with him. The peak in the later stage of Huiyuan territory. How can it be? What has this woman done in recent years? He is in the hinterland of Xiaolin, and how can he drive away the cold poison in his body? Aware of this, Qin Shuo's face suddenly changed slightly. In this way, it would take more effort to subdue the Cold Frost. It's Xiao Yan. The boy has a strange fire. He must have helped Cold Frost eliminate the cold poison in his body, otherwise he will never recover. On one side, the old man in hemp robe stood and stared at the Cold Frost opposite, with a sneer in the bottom of his eyes. Xiao Yang. It's that Xiao Yang again. Yi Luotian, where is the boy you said now? I've searched all over the western regions, but I still haven't found him. Where is he? Hearing the words of the old man in hemp robe, Qin Shuo's face immediately showed an uncontrollable strong intention of killing. There is no doubt that he will repay the revenge of killing his son. The old man in hemp robe beside him is Yi Luotian, valley leader. The boy hasn't been seen for years, and we have searched most of the western regions. At present, only here is left. You mean Xiao Yang is here? There's nowhere else. Yi Luotian nodded solemnly on his face, and Qin Shuo thought secretly in his heart. After looking back, he looked at Lung Bingshuang. His eyes were extremely cold and scolded. Cold frost, it seems that today, I can not only calculate the accounts between you and me, but also avenge my son. For Qin Shuo's words, the cold frost was cold, and there was no emotional fluctuation on his face, but the terrible cold that spread out from his body became more and more thick. Cold frost. Die for me. Suddenly, Qin Shuo's body moved, his upper and lower qi surged, his hands crossed in front of him, and the two short guns condensed by cold ice fell into his hands. The gun bodies staggered, and the two powerful energy skills suddenly burst out. Together with his body shape, he also burst out against cold ice and frost at the same time. In the face of Qin Shuo's attack, the cold frost did not dodge. The slender jade hand scratched hard in front of him, and the cold ice in the palm condensed rapidly. When his jade hand held it, a long ice blue sword also condensed with it. The long sword whirled in the palm of the hand, and the source qi shot rapidly, dissolving the two oncoming energies. Then the delicate body trembled slightly, and disappeared in the same place in an instant. Ding ding. Almost at the next moment, the crisp sound of gold and iron collision suddenly sounded in the sky. The body shapes of the two figures were also staggered rapidly. The two short guns collided with the slender ice sword rapidly. The fierce collision sound sounded one after another, and the powerful energy afterwaves were constantly sweeping across the world. In the face of such a battle, the faces of all the people present changed dramatically. All the strong fighters were shocked by it. In the later stage of Huayuanjing, it was really terrible. Compared with these so-called strong fighters, these powers were just the difference between heaven and earth. No wonder they say that there is a watershed between Huayuan territory and Dodi. From the First World War at the moment, the people present can clearly see how huge the gap between themselves and the two people in front of them is. The so-called fighting emperor is no better than in front of the strong in Huayuan territory. Hundreds of recruits have been recruited, but the battle between the two people is still not divided. Instead, Yi Luotian on one side looks at Qin Shuo in the field, and his heart sinks. If he continues according to this guy's playing method, I'm afraid he won't get the result he wants. After hundreds of moves, Lung Bingshuang not only failed, but suppressed Qin Shuo. As the cold in Lung Bingshuang became more and more severe, even its breath became more and more powerful. If it continued like this, wouldn't Lung Bingshuang's cultivation break through the source territory? Such a strange scene made Yi Luotian feel a little uneasy. The mind moved, and the source qi in the body secretly circulated. Yi Luotian saw the right time. At the moment when Qin Shuo collided with cold frost again, the body under the hemp robe suddenly flashed. However, in the blink of an eye, it had appeared in front of the two people. With a backhand slap, it fell on the fragrant shoulder of cold frost. Pooh! The blood poured out, and the cold and frosty body trembled suddenly. A dull hum came out between the pretty nose, and the body quickly dodged. Even if it bypassed the key of the body, the two short guns left several scars on the latter's weak and boneless body, and the red blood dyed the ice-blue dress. Lung Bingshuang's body retreated, and the Tianying four people not far behind hurriedly came forward, protected Lung Bingshuang left and right, and looked at Yi Luotian two people opposite. Despicable. The cold frost tried to resist the sharp pain in his body, wiped away the red blood flowing from the corners of his mouth, and couldn't help shouting and scolding in his mouth. He, we didn't say it was one-on-one. It's just your wishful thinking. Yi Luotian scoffed at this, but Qin Shuo glared at Yi Luotian and scolded coldly. Bastard, didn't I say that this is a battle between me and her? When will you intervene? Valley leader, you should know the situation better than me. If I don't do it, I'm afraid. You. Hearing the speech, Qin Shuo bit his teeth and took back his eyes. Yi Luotian glanced at the person in front of him. He couldn't help sneering in his heart, and a very vague killing intention flashed quickly from the bottom of his eyes. Then, Yi Luotian paced forward with a sneer. Facing Tianying and others, he just waved them away, and then came to cold frost. At the moment, although the latter still wants to resist, the blow of Yi Luotian just now scattered all the source gas in his body, and he couldn't condense again in a short time. Therefore, he had to watch Yi Luotian lift his palm and fall on his head. Lung Bingshuang, if you want to blame it, it's because you shouldn't have saved Xiao Yang. Gaga, gaga. Then, with Yi Luotian's palm falling, the wind howling suddenly sounded between heaven and earth. Almost at the same time, a black-robed figure appeared in front of the cold frost like a ghost. The palm covered by light blue flame collided with Yi Luotian's palm. Bang! Deep in the Shalin Mountains, a dull bang rang through the sky. Almost at the same time, Yi Luotian, who had originally shot at the cold frost, was also blasted back by this sudden attack. The strong and overbearing power blew Yi Luotian out, and even the bones of his arms were forcibly broken, and there was a surge of qi and blood in his body. However, in a twinkling, Yi Luotian's body disappeared between heaven and earth. Only a low bang was heard. It can be seen that the latter has even hit into the distant mountains. As for the specific situation, even Qin Shuo present also knows nothing. The sudden changes in the field made everyone present dull in an instant. Shocked eyes fell on the suddenly appeared figure in black. After seeing the latter's handsome face, the shock in the heart was irreplaceable. Raising his head, Xiao Yang looked at the group of people in front of him. His extremely cold eyes slightly paused on Qin Shuo, who was led by him. The latter was suddenly cold in his heart. The young man in black in front of him actually gave him an inexplicable pressure. Then, Xiao Yang turned his eyes and looked at the pale cold frost behind him. When Xiao Yang stooped down, Lungbing looked at Xiao Yang with a shocked face. The shock in his heart was unspeakable. In recent years, Lengbing's Huang has never heard of any trace of the latter. At the beginning, Xiao Yang went to the western wasteland and never returned. She even thought that the latter was dead, but she didn't expect that Xiao Yang would suddenly appear again at her most dangerous time, and her strength seems to have reached an extremely terrible level. Unfortunately, with her current situation, but there is no way to explore the depth of Xiao Yang's breath. Xiao Yang leaned down without any hesitation. As soon as his palm turned over, he took out a 5-level pill from the ring. Regardless of whether Lung Bingshuang's eyes agreed or not, he directly stuffed it into each other's mouth. Immediately, the gentle medicine immediately spread in Lung Bingshuang's body. Well, the warm feeling from the body made Lung Bingshuang's nose burst into a low groan. Xiao Yang's face was stunned. Lung Bingshuang also hurriedly turned his head. Then Xiao Yang got up and looked at Tianying and others who fell on the mountain in the distance. At the moment, all 5 people were seriously injured, but his eyes were still full of shock. He looked at Xiao Yang with surprise in his eyes. Although they can't see the depth of Xiao Yang's cultivation, from the attack just now, Xiao Yang is present today. These people in Qin Huangmi Valley are destined to be unable to do anything to them. This is a kind of trust in Xiao Yang's strength. In the shocked eyes of Lung Bingshuang, Xiao Yang picked up the latter's delicate body and placed it next to Tianying and others. Then he took pills for several people. Then he flashed over again. His cold eyes looked at Qin Shuo and others again. Who are you, boy? With Qin Shuo's accomplishments, we can see Xiao Yang's details at a glance. In the middle of Huayuanjing, such accomplishments appeared in a young man. I have to say, it's really amazing, but if he expects to deal with him with such accomplishments, it's a bit of wishful thinking. The gap between Huayuan territory is as big as a gap. Even if it is only a line difference, it is enough for him to crush his opponent. What's more, he faces Xiao Yang, whose cultivation is only in the middle of Huayuan territory. Xiao Yang. At the moment when the words fell in his mouth, Xiao Yang's body immediately turned into a streamer, fast as lightning. However, in an instant, he appeared in front of Qin Shuo and hit Qin Shuo's head with a fist. Are you Xiao Yang? Hearing each other's name, Qin Shuo was shocked. He didn't think that the so-called Xiao Yang was just a young man. Xiao Yang, since you brought it to the door yourself, I'll solve you and Cold Frost together today. Then, seeing Xiao Yang rushing, Qin Shuo showed no weakness. With a wave of his hands, he started with 2 short guns again. His body flashed, and the sharp tip of the gun stabbed Xiao Yang's head. Their life-for-life play also surprised the onlookers around, but the next moment, Qin Shuo twisted his body, and the short gun still stabbed forward, but he also avoided his own ki. On the other hand, Xiao Yang did not dodge. When the short gun came, the speed of the move suddenly accelerated. At the same time, the fierce strange fire also burst out with a puff, quickly wrapped the whole body, and the terrible high temperature immediately released. I saw that the short gun stabbed at Xiao Yang quickly melted in front of the strange fire at a speed visible to the naked eye. Almost at the same time, Xiao Yang's fist also trembled suddenly and bombarded Qin Shuo's chest with an extremely strange angle. Bang! When the ice gun melted, the source gas on it also dispersed. On the contrary, Qin Shuo was severely hit on his chest by the fist wrapped by different fire. The robe he was wearing burst into fragments from front to back. The terrible force blasted the bones in front of his chest, and the whole face turned red in an instant. Then, with a puff, a big mouthful of fresh blood burst out, the strong body flew out of control and crashed into the crowd behind him. When everyone looked at Qin Shuo's chest, there was an inch-deep fist print. Around the red fist print, blood was pouring out, and his face was turning white in an instant, and the breath in his body was extremely chaotic. Then Xiao Yang set off again and bullied himself into the crowd. In the frightened eyes of the crowd, he punched one by one, but in just a few breaths, more than a dozen strong men at the level of fighting emperor were killed by Xiao Yang. However, just as Xiao Yang was preparing to fight Qin Shuo again, Yi Luotian, who had been blasted out, suddenly appeared and forced Xiao Yang back. Then, when Xiao Yang came back, he fled here with Qin Shuo. Then, Xiao Yang, who was about to pursue, was suddenly attracted by the scream from the mountain behind him. The moment he looked back, he also saw the cold frost that was taking the pill and resting, but somehow, a thin layer of cold ice suddenly appeared on his charming body, and covered his whole charming body with the speed visible to the naked eye, and passed out. The western region, deep in the Shilin Mountains, is the bottom of a fiery volcano. Xiao Yang looked at the cold frost that had been covered by a layer of solid ice, and his heart was very nervous. He didn't expect that in order to deal with Qin Shuo, Leng Bingshuang would use this extreme method to improve his strength. The latter's move is no different from suicide. After a simple exploration, Xiao Yang clearly found that there was a small piece of ice crystal in the cold frost body at the moment, and the reason why she became like this was because of the ice crystal. That ice crystal is not ordinary ice, but a very cold soul. In order to gain enough power in a short time, Cold Frost forcibly obtained a piece of extremely cold ice spirit from under the ice spirit cold spring and swallowed it into the body, which led to the situation of the latter at the moment. The infinite cold power spread uncontrollably. The powerful power made Leng Bingshuang have a terrible fighting power against Qin Shuo. At the same time, the spread of the cold power in her body also affected her internal organs and bones in the shortest time. Under Xiao Yang's exploration, the cold ice even covered most of the internal organs in Leng Bingshuang. The extremely cold temperature is constantly released, and the vitality in his body is disappearing at an extremely fast speed. Nowadays, the cold ice wrapped on the surface of the cold frost is nothing, but the main thing is the extremely cold soul in his body. If the yin and cold force contained in it continues to spread, I'm afraid it's difficult to survive even with the cultivation of cold frost. Because of their injuries, Tianying didn't sneak here with Xiao Yang. Therefore, at the bottom of the cave, there are only Xiao Yang and cold frost. Poof! Without any hesitation, Xiao Yang stretched out his hand and waved, and the light blue flame immediately spewed out. The raging flame immediately covered the ice on the surface of the cold frost, and the terrible high temperature was released. Then, the original solid ice melted quickly at the speed visible to the naked eye, until the delicate body of the cold frost was exposed to the air again, and the strange fire dispersed quietly. Although the ice layer was broken, it could not solve the problem. Xiao Yang, who knew this well, didn't hesitate. Then he pointed out his 2 fingers and touched it on the forehead of the cold frost, and a small flame lit up. The blue flame released a hot temperature and invaded the cold frost body to protect her mind from the cold. Then Xiao Yang shot again and again, After a little fire on his hands, feet and limbs, he turned his eyes to the proud body of cold frost in front of him. Looking at the delicate body in front of him, Xiao Yang frowned and couldn't help showing a difficult color on his face. However, he knew that this woman was not easy to provoke. Last time she almost killed herself. If she came again this time, she would be very difficult to let go of herself. Thinking of this, Xiao Yang could not help but bite his teeth and frown. Now, it has become a big problem whether he can save people or not. For a long time, seeing the cold ice surging up again on Lung Bingshuang's delicate body, Xiao Yang finally has a horizontal heart. Everything is tight to save people. Not to mention that Lung Bingshuang once saved his life, even if it has already arrived, but Xiao Yang's nature makes him unable to save the latter now. Sorry, I have to. Biting his teeth, Xiao Yang stretched out his right hand, bent his 5 fingers, and then fell on the cold belly. Suddenly, a refreshing cold breath gushed out like a fountain and rushed straight to Xiao Yang's palm. Feeling the sudden energy impact, Xiao Yang's face suddenly changed, his heart moved, and a fierce flame burst out suddenly, covering the whole palm. Then, it was divided into 6 hot energy breath from the fingertips and palm of the 5 fingers, and poured into the body of cold frost. The 6 strands of energy quickly spread to all meridians in the cold frost body, from small to large. At an extremely fast speed, they eliminated the yin and cold forces distributed throughout the body one by one. Finally, it was the turn of the 5 zong organs and 6 viscera, and the whole process of expelling the yin and cold forces lasted for 2 hours. In the whole process, we should not only consider the distribution strength of those yin and cold forces, but also consider the condition in the cold frost. After all, the latter still has injuries. Although there is the recovery of the 5th order pill, if you are not careful, you may still leave trauma. In addition, because the cold frost itself belongs to ice, so, Xiao Yang needs to be more careful when dispelling those yin and cold forces, otherwise he may hurt the cold frost itself. If his cultivation is affected, I'm afraid the latter will hate him even if he can recover. Then next, it was the extremely cold ice. Extreme cold spirit itself has extremely strong yin cold power. If those yin cold powers are used properly, they will naturally become a panacea to help people improve their cultivation. However, if they can't be controlled or even ingested in excess, they are likely to become a sharp weapon to kill people. Obviously, cold ice cream has ingested too much. With her current cultivation, it can't be refined at all. Now the only way is to disperse the cold power contained in the extremely cold soul as much as possible, and then use different fire to refine slowly. As for this process, I'm afraid it will be particularly long, but for Xiao Yang, this is undoubtedly the safest and safe way. When he thought of doing it, he didn't have much choice for the cold frost at this time. Then Xiao Yang took back his palm. At the same time, the yin cold force blocked in the cold frost was released again. A strong cold breath spread rapidly, and the little blood color that had recovered slightly on the cold frost pretty face also faded rapidly. Then Xiao Yang stretched out his hands and laid them flat on the belly and below the neck of the cold frost's delicate body. The palms of his hands released a hot energy breath, poured into the cold frost's body, and began to refine the yin and cold qi that tried to continue to spread. He wanted to dissipate all the yin and cold power in the extremely cold spirit from the long consumption. But this time, just as Xiao Yang was preparing to refine those yin and cold forces, a strange suction suddenly gushed out of the cyclone in the cold frost body. At the same time, those yin and cold forces diffused outward from the extremely cold ice soul suddenly seemed to be attracted and rushed uncontrollably to the center of the cyclone in the cold frost body. Almost at the same time, the delicate body of the cold frost was also associated with the rapid cooling. The already white skin looked more crystal at the moment. Xiao Yang, who was aware of this, quickly took back his hands and looked down at his 2 cold palms. He felt a shock in his heart. Then, Xiao Yang looked up and saw that at the moment, a very cold breath was spreading outward from the body of cold frost, and the power of the extremely cold soul in the body was being absorbed rapidly. Strange ice blue fine lines also appeared on the hands and arms of cold frost. When Xiao Yang saw those fine lines, the expression on his face is a sudden change. This is the body of extreme yin. The extremely yin body, like the misfortune poison body, is an extremely rare special constitution in the world. Its own attribute is cold. After the outbreak, it can arouse the power of heaven and earth. It is said that where the extremely yin body appears, the heaven and earth are frozen, and thousands of miles are white. Wherever the extremely yin body goes, the heaven and earth can also be frozen, and winter snow flies all over the world is a white purgatory. Apart from anything else, just the fact that it is as famous as the disaster poison body can frighten countless people, and the situation shown by the cold frost at the moment is just the same as the description of the extremely yin body in the rumors. Damn it, how can this woman have such a ghost constitution? Seeing that the extremely cold soul in the cold frost body was swallowed up by the latter at a very fast speed, Xiao Yang's face became a little ugly. The extremely yin body could be as bright as the disaster poison body. If there were no terror, he would never believe it, but the trouble is now. The woman seems to be waking up. Buzz. At the moment of Xiao Yang's exclamation falling, the cold frost's originally closed beautiful eyes suddenly opened at this moment. At the same time, its cold delicate body also suddenly got up, and a cold breath swept out at the same time. The cold breath instantly reduced the temperature in the cave. Even the magma that had been surging up the moment before was involuntarily calmed down, as if it had been frozen. At the same time, Xiao Yang quickly looked up and felt a chill in his heart. Sure enough, the cold frost and beautiful eyes at the moment were all pale, and there was no look at all. The look on her indifferent pretty face was extremely cold. The most terrible thing was that the woman was staring at Xiao Yang at the moment, as if she wanted to apologize for the disrespect of the first and the last. Aware of the killing intention revealed in the cold eyes of cold frost, Xiao Yang's back suddenly cooled, and almost at the same time, the delicate body of cold frost also trembled in an instant. However, in the blink of an eye, it had appeared in front of Xiao Yang without any pause, raised his jade hand, and the extremely cold ice covered his slender palm in an instant, slapped Xiao Yang's face hard. This woman. What a terrible speed to read. I always knew the terrible of cold frost, but until now, after seeing the terrible speed of the latter, Xiao Yang really felt the strong strength of the other party. Fortunately, this guy didn't have any strange means, otherwise Xiao Yang would really be difficult to deal with. While his face changed, Xiao Yang's body also retreated rapidly. The soles of his feet stamped heavily on the ground, and his body tilted back slightly, which seemed to be extremely dangerous to avoid the slap of cold frost. Hiss. Although he escaped the cold frost's jade hand, the extremely cold wind still left several shallow blood marks on Xiao Yang's face. Then, before Xiao Yang could stabilize his body, cold frost actually followed up again, and a slap from self-injury fell hard on Xiao Yang's abdomen. Although Xiao Yang avoided the blow with his extraordinary speed, but the jade hand was also dangerous and dangerous. It slipped from Xiao Yang's crotch. The cold wind made Xiao Yang tight and his scalp numb. Later, in the face of the attack of cold frost, Xiao Yang didn't dare to relax at all, for fear that the crazy woman would do something terrible. In the face of the latter's endless attack, Xiao Yang made repeated moves to take over the attack of cold frost. After that, the cold frost released the Frost Avenue. 20 ice mirrors were released together to surround Xiao Yang from all directions. Fierce energy and strong wind constantly rushed towards Xiao Yang. If there was no Void Avenue, I'm afraid even Xiao Yang would inevitably suffer a lot of damage. With the passage of time, Xiao Yang was also shocked to find that the cave under the volcano had been completely frozen unknowingly, not only the four walls of the cave, but also the originally rolling magma. The hot fire had long disappeared, but was as dark as coal. The surface of the whole magma was almost completely cooled. Moreover, as the cold ice covering the cave becomes thicker and thicker, if it continues like this, Xiao Yang is afraid that there will be no way out. At that time, it will be really troublesome. With this in mind, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing bitterly. The extremely yin embodiment of the cold frost has now erupted. Although the energy contained in the extremely cold spirit is not worrying, the cold frost at the moment is more dangerous than before. Even Xiao Yang himself can't help being surrounded by the crisis. If you want to remove all these crises, you must stop the cold frost at the moment. But, at the thought of somewhere in his heart, Xiao Yang still couldn't help hesitating. I'm afraid he can't bear the result, or cold frost can't bear it. According to the records of ancient books read by Xiao Yang in the past, since ancient times, the body of extreme yin has appeared very few times, and every time it appears, the group is women. This may also be because women's physique is naturally cold, but in any way, the strength of the body of extreme yin is obvious to all. But from ancient times to now, however, there has never been any method to control the special constitution of extreme yin body. You know, even if it's terror, such as misfortune and poison, there are some countermeasures in ancient books, but people in the world have no way to deal with the extremely yin body. Of course, this does not mean that there must be no way to deal with it if there are no ancient books. Xiao Yang once remembered that when he mentioned this matter with Yarolaro once said that the essence of extreme yin body is caused by the excessive force of yin cold. It is also divided into congenital and acquired. Congenital body is naturally yin cold, but its constitution will have an incubation period, perhaps several years, or maybe a lifetime. The acquired body is caused by long-term accumulation. Once the acquired extreme yin body is formed, there will be no means to make up for it. However, Yarolaro personally refuted this affirmative answer. Since the extreme yin body is caused by the excessive force of yin cold, as long as the just to strong constitution is combined with it, according to common sense, there is a great chance of success. Of course, there have been many people who have tried this since ancient times, but unfortunately, not to mention the combination, it is extremely difficult for the ordinary strong to get close to the person who has the extreme yin body. Even if they can barely get close, most people will be unable to support themselves because the latter has too much yin and cold power around him, and then they will be ruthlessly killed by the people with extremely yin body. However, Xiao Yang is an exception. After hesitating for a long time, when Xiao Yang regained his consciousness, he found that there was only a few feet left between himself and the cold frost. Moreover, as the extremely cold spirit was absorbed by the cold frost, the breath emitted from the latter's body was also a powerful terror. Even if it was only one step away from returning to the source, if the latter could not be controlled anymore, then it's really too late. Damn it. I promise you, I will be responsible for you to the end. He scolded in his heart. After all, Xiao Yang bit his teeth with hatred and moved his mind. At the same time, the three images were determined to be displayed in an instant. At the same time, the raging flame wrapped his whole body in an instant. Then, he grabbed the jade hand hit again by cold frost in the palm of his hand. At the same time, the other hand waved hard, and the invisible strength was in an instant, tear up the ice blue dress wrapped on the cold frost body. This video will end here.